Thank you everyone for coming to our presentation here today. So we're going to be talking about the modern finance function and really focusing on three key trends that Nick and I have seen emerge over the series of the last few years, and in particular over the last year at some of the various conferences that we've been presenting at and gathering information from, as well as from our clients. Those trends, transformation, upskilling, and of course, AI, right? Everybody's talking about AI. We will be talking about that a little bit today, but we are going to be trying to take a little bit more of a pragmatic approach with how this is really driven by the finance tech stack, along with these other trends here. If you want to hear all the shiny things about AI, feel free to stop by our booth. I'm sure our sales guys would love to talk to you about that.
One other thing too, real quick, just we're gonna have a couple of live polling. So if you have your cell phone ready, we're gonna have some QR scanning going on. So if you have your phone ready, that'll help get some participation going in the presentation.
Yep. So I'm Tom Hood. I am a partner and managing director at SC&H in our enterprise advisory and transformation practice. I have around 15 years of experience leading transformation efforts. When my career first started out, my core focus was implementing the Oracle EPM solutions. So Oracle Hyperion, Oracle EPM Cloud. As those engagements became more complex and things began to change and become more interconnected, I've now transitioned into looking at transformation across the finance tech stack, which we'll be going into in more detail here in the presentation.
You didn't give our official introduction. So how many people out there have heard of the wet bandits or the sticky bandits? Any Home Alone fans out there? Tom and I like to refer to ourselves as the Beltway bandits. Spend a lot of time around the 495 corridor here. If there's traffic to be found, we will find it. So we spent a lot of time working together. We're gonna try to have a little fun together going through this. But I have a similar background from Tom, coming up with the working through finance transformation, mainly on the planning and forecasting side. And around 6 or 7 years ago at SC&H, helped stand up our data analytics, automation, and analytics solutions practice, which is really armed at bringing technology that's outside of the core kind of finance tech stack to finance and accounting organizations to help them with efficiency, automation, pretty much analytics, anything under the sun there, we're helping with clients with now.
Yep.
Just a little bit of background about SC&H. I like to say we're the best damn consulting firm you probably never heard of. We're structured much like a Big Four organization where we have traditional CPA services like tax and audit, but Tom and I do run our advisory and transformation group, which you can kick to the next slide, is really focused across everything to lead a successful transformation project. So this includes standing up a transformation program management office, starting with things like how do we even get a roadmap of how we should prioritize our transformation? Is it really a technology issue or do we need to change process? So we come in up front, help advise clients on the right path to move forward, doing things like setting up a proper chart of accounts, which we now refer to as an enterprise data model, because that's really expanding outside of the financial tech stack, all the way through implementation. So we work with the leading products like Oracle and OneStream to help our clients through the actual implementation phase, along with the leading cloud infrastructure platforms out there too, like Microsoft and Snowflake, Power BI.
Cool. All right, now that we got the intros out of the way, so we want to dive into our first poll here. This is a poll that we've been doing at the various conferences that we've been speaking at. What we want you to do is scan the QR code and then select the top 5 trends that are most important to you or that are impacting you the most. We like to try to see how these trends are evolving over the months as the year goes through to see really what's coming next here. So as you guys start entering those in, we should see the live results coming through. Consistent, yeah. So give a couple of seconds to get this in.
Man, it's fun when this works out, Tom. Let's get ready for our next slide.
So, yeah, I don't even think we need to talk about this. We just go to the next slide here. All right, so just remember those top 3 here. We're gonna go to the next slide. So this is from the North American Finance Executive Summit. Very similar group as you all. This was back in February in Tampa. And those same trends that you are feeling here, they're also feeling, and they're remaining pretty consistent. Obviously, some things are moving around, but upskilling continues to be one of the key things that is coming out of these conferences here. When we talk about the finance tech stack, we're going to talk about some examples of how some finance groups have upskilled their team and even reconfigured their entire team in order to meet the demands that are out there. And I think really all these are underpinned by digital transformation driving these as well.
Yep.
So getting into transformation, what does transformation mean? All of you are on different phases of your transformation journey. At the end of the day, you and your team need to be able what you are transforming to and why. And your team needs to understand that and be bought into that. I think during the Gartner keynote, this theme was also hit on, which was interesting to see, the importance of having that future state vision of ultimately what you want to be and driving everything else in your organization to get you there.
I mean, just to kind of piggyback off that, but even as folks come up and start talking to us at our booth about this, it's very clear that people are on different phases, different organizations are in different phases of transformation. Some organizations, even though they may be a multi-billion-dollar organization, seem super sophisticated, could be running on an ERP platform that's 20 years old, written on COBOL language, for example. That's a very different conversation that companies that are already on the cloud and maybe are looking for a way to create more value through an EPM solution or analytics. But it's understanding kind of where your organization is on that path and be able to prioritize things so that way you can be successful, because transformation is not going to stop. I think that's why we see acceleration of digital transformation as being one of those key themes. It used to be like this thing of, we're going to embark on this big, long project. It's going to be 3 to 4 years. We're going to put all these resources behind it, and then we're going to be done. Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, we have things like AI now that come in and disrupt that, need to figure out how to incorporate that. A few years ago, it was cloud technology, right? So those things are going to continue to evolve. We have to get better and define those goals so we can be successful over the course of time.
So, all right, we've got a little illustration here. Those of you who are well-versed in ancient Greek wrestlers, you'll know this story well. Those of you who don't, this is the story of Milo of Croton. He is a real historical figure back in 600 BC in Greece. He is known as being one of the most famous wrestlers. And the interesting story around Milo, the mythology around him, is that he started out with the vision of wanting to be the best, strongest, baddest wrestler in Greece. And so what he did is he didn't start with grabbing that thing on the left that's supposed to be a bull. ChatGPT, I think, took some liberties on.
Tom also is moonlighting as an artist on the side, so if you need characters drawn at an event, Tom's available. Yeah.
So instead of starting with that, what he did is he started carrying a baby calf up a hill when he was younger. And every day he would carry that same calf up the hill. And as he grew, so did the calf. 2 years later, he's carrying a mid-sized bull or goat or whatever that is. And then ultimately to when 4 years later, he's carrying a full-size bull up his back. And by all historical records, he actually did walk into the first Olympic wrestling ring with that bull on his back. The key things here is, one, he had the vision. Two, he had the discipline, which that was also hit in the Gartner keynote, that you need to be disciplined in your finance transformation. That goes with the upskilling with your resources to continue to move and be able to maintain each step that you're getting to. It also means that you can't just all of a sudden pick up AI and think it's going to work if you don't have the rest of your finance tech stack working and in order. So in this context, AI is the bull thing at the end. So if you want to get there, you're going to have to walk up the hill a couple times, and it's going to seem arduous. But if you have that common goal and vision of where you and your team are trying to get to, it helps gain alignment and reduce some of the resistance that would occur in that transformation.
All right, another key catalyst. So this is a theme that we've seen change over the last few years here, but with the finance community being the folks from the audience here, usually there's a kind of clear differentiation of when finance is taking charge of a transformation project and when IT takes charge of it. So I'd like to, we're not going to need our phones for this, but just kind of raise of hands here. Who from this conversation or in this audience feels that the finance organization is actually owning your transformation journey? That's good. I'd say about 75% of that, which is what we want to see. So I think it's very important for the CFO, finance executives to be setting the tone for what transformation is going to look like in the organization. A lot of times when we see this flow through more of like the CIO track, or even if it kind of funnels into financial systems sometimes leading this charge, is requirements become more about the technical solution. So what can the technology do? What is the capability around the technology? How is the off-the-shelf solution just going to work? Well, that stuff's important. It has to fit to the business requirements. It has to fit to where you're going, where you see the organization going, where you're willing to make process change. All of that needs to funnel really from the business side of the house to make sure that it's going to get adopted. You're actually going to be successful when you roll this out to your user community, and that you're actually going to get the results that you're looking for. So having the CFO be that champion, can't say enough how important that is. On a implementation that we're working on right now, it's actually, we're having some stagnation, and the CFO stepped in. She said, whatever you need from me, we're going to have bi-weekly meetings, bring blockers to my table, let's talk about it, and how can I step in to actually move these things forward. So when there's something that is stuck, if we need participation from resources who are busy, she comes in and helps us make that happen. So I think it's very important for you to stay involved, making sure that you're being the voice and the champion of where these transformation journeys are going.
Yeah, absolutely critical.
I think the other piece too is putting the right team around yourselves. So I refer to this as two different ways. The political, nice way to say it, is get a good techno-functional lead involved in your transformation projects, someone that can be your eyes and ears, and someone who's going to be able to blend the technical and the functional together to, again, make sure before you get to a UAT cycle, you go through this long journey of building out functionality. Someone that's going to know something's right before you get there. All right, try not to bring that stuff up late at the end of the game. It's always going to cause issues. I also like to refer to this person as an ass kicker. So it's got to be someone that's not willing to take no for an answer, someone who's going to drive change forward. We've had a couple projects where these resources have just been instrumental in how these projects go.
All right. This next slide here is really framing out the way that we've been looking at transformation, and this is ultimately going to be overlaid with the finance tech stack. So this graphic here is from some really good research that came out of AI CPA SEMA. It occurred over, I think it was right around 2020 when COVID hit, so great research that no one really read just because of everything going on. But they did a really thorough breakdown of what is the DNA of finance. They polled around 5,000 CFOs across the world to really figure this out and figure out what finance organizations need to be shifting to. So they really broke it down into two categories here. You have hindsight and foresight. And building up from hindsight, you have information, which is the core component of your organization, the transactions, the statistics, right? Everything in there that you then pull insights out of. That then goes into being able to influence decisions in the organization and then ultimately driving impact into that organization. And as a finance group and finance leader, I really feel like this frames it out pretty well, where you need to be focused on trying to upskill your resources and then also work on improving your tech stack to move people from that hindsight area up into the influence and impact area here.
I think some additional kind of metrics here that have been gathered. This actually came from a Gartner poll a few months back. But really just take a look at the top four of where CFOs looking or drive change. We had on that last screen kind of like the moving to the value creation. How do we create impact? All the things in the top there are the tools necessary that you're going to need from your finance tech stack in order to achieve those and to do it at scale and speed. Right, so having your defined metrics, having ways that you can actually analyze those on a month-over-month, year-over-year basis at your fingertips. How can we reforecast? How can we do scenario modeling? Having a strategy so that way we know what data is good, what data is not good. So emphasis on data quality. All this is super important to get to the next one on the list, which is focusing on enterprise growth. So if you're going in and you're trying to guide, whether it's your BUs, kind of your revenue side of the house, or where they're focusing, where investments are going to be made, all those things, having them in a cohesive manner at the top there is what's going to enable you to actually do that.
Yep, absolutely. And then just keep in mind the metrics, analytics, and reporting, and planning and budgeting and forecasting here. For the next slide, we had mentioned this concept of the finance tech stack, or it's not really a novel idea, but the way that we are breaking this down is we're looking at, you have your ERP and your source systems, which going back to the DNA of finance, that's really that information hindsight area. To then you have the enterprise performance management set of tools, which this is going to be your Oracle EPM, your adaptive insights, OneStream solutions like that. And then you have the data solutions down below, which goes across really that information and insight and beyond there. For finance, I think the key areas that you need to be paying attention to, and why we have the two blocks here, EPM and data solutions expanded a little bit, is these are the most important tools that you need to be working on, improving and building out and driving adoption in your organization to really take the information that's in your organization and truly enhance it, right? And take it to the next level. So planning, budgeting, and forecasting was a top area of focus for CFOs inside of EPM, the planning and budgeting tools that are out there. Huge area for improvement that we're seeing at clients and prospects is the EPM platforms are typically underutilized. And what I mean by that is typically it's put in for corporate to submit their information. Maybe ops is submitting their budget and forecast, but they're not truly doing it in a way that is driver-based and really enabling them to have an integrated planning process throughout there. And we'll go into an example about this shortly, but I'll pass it to Nick just to talk about the data solutions here that wrap around all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we take a look at this slide, it kind of helps put in perspective as you're walking around the exhibit hall and you see all these different vendors with different products, kind of like where they all fit together. So I think that what we're trying to do, especially, is create a finance data ecosystem that is actually working together in a harmonized fashion. So when we think about like our ERP solutions, which are ingrained in your business, they're the operational way that you're capturing transactions, that's going to be the core of if you're trying to drill down to get to the lowest level of detail, you're going to need to do analysis at that level. But it's also important now to find ways to integrate that into the EPM solution to drive that value in automation. So I mean, historically, it used to be taking trial balance exports and using a flat file to import that into an EPM solution. Well, how can we do that in a more automated way? It's by putting the data ecosystem around the EPM solution, the ERP, so that we pull data out at a transactional level and we always maintain that grain in case you want to be able to drill back and analyze it, but we can summarize it and get it into the EPM tool at the right grain of detail for, again, actual forecast plan, variance analysis, and doing some of the more detailed planning activities that Tom was mentioning there. Yeah. I think another big aspect, just before you dive a little deeper on EPM, from the data solution side is, I mentioned this earlier, thinking about an enterprise data model. So I think in the finance and accounting space, everyone thinks about it as their chart of accounts, and again, how you capture transactions. But thinking about that broader and how that's going to tie in data across some of these other platforms, so like your labor planning, making sure you have good lineage around your cost centers or your departments, using good naming conventions, for your master data and metadata, has become so important now because that data transfers from so many different platforms. By the time it originates with a transaction to when it gets to a report, if the naming conventions are changing, it's going to be very hard to identify where that data came from and if it's of quality. So I think emphasizing this stuff up front, making sure that you're involving, whether it's your IT teams, if you can bring some of these skill sets in-house to the finance and accounting teams as well, to focus on the data aspect to make sure that that's right, and it's not something you have to think about, will really allow you to accelerate some of the other things that the EPM solutions can do.
Yeah. The other area to just call out too is embedded AI. So here's our AI talk right now. This is really the extent of it that we're going to hit. AI is in these solutions today. It is being embedded in there. If you are on a cloud solution, it is going to get better and better every day. But for you to truly be able to use it, you need to have in place really what Nick was talking about with the enterprise data model. You need to have the right level of granularity in your solutions to really take advantage of AI, or instead, right, if you're able to do that, you don't have to worry about going and bolting on other solutions or creating an additional mess inside your ecosystem. So that's going to be a core point of focus.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I was going to go into the client example here. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, we're going to go for it. All right, so on the EPM space, we're going to go through just an example here of a client that did this journey really well to deeply use really all the solutions that are up here in the EPM area. So they're a large hotel company. They have around 2,500 properties, 700 that they own around the world. Nick and I worked with them over a series of years, and they had a very disciplined approach to how they were going to go from their ERP and fully roll out their EPM solution across all of their key planning processes. Starting with close consolidation for all of their external reporting they had to do, they went with that. They then put in a planning and budgeting solution for corporate and consolidated hotel reporting.
I'll also say too, just to stop you, like they had the opportunity that they were going through basically consolidation of two major entities. They were going through an IPO process, and they did have the opportunity to streamline their chart of accounts so that there was lineage between their ERP solution and the EPM solutions too. So they did an excellent job of kind of bridging the gap there and making sure the foundation was set moving forward. So I think that's good.
Yeah, key piece there. And so along their journey with the corporate application for budgeting and forecasting, that was again consolidated budgeting and forecasting that they had. They then expanded into detailed G&A and corporate allocations, headcount planning. Then they embarked on, it was really a 2-year project where I think Nick and I were, I don't know how many countries we were in for months at a time, working with the different hotels to standardize their planning process around the world at the hotel property level. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to have an integrated planning process from their lowest level of operations at the hotel all the way up into their forecasts and budgets that they're looking at so that they can understand what's going on in a consistent way. That involved a lot of work with them to talk amongst themselves to figure out how are we going to have the hotel on the side of 95 planned the same way as a resort in Hawaii where the parking lot makes more revenue than the entire hotel on the side of 95. That's a key piece of that transformation is getting everybody bought into the way that they're going to function and plan in the future. But they're a really good example of how far you can embed EPM into your planning process and what it looks like when you have it really working all the way through down into the lowest level of operations. And then that ultimately positions you to leverage AI at that lowest level here to then drive things like procurement, other things like that, staffing at the hotel, all those types of things.
Yeah, and I think the key piece, touched on it earlier, is they did form the right transformation team to be able to execute on this. So, as smart as Tom and I like to think that we are, there's no way we would have been successful with this client without having really strong internal resources that kicked our ass and also kicked resources' ass across the way to make sure that we were doing this correctly. But what they did is they blended a resource that was along for the ride. She was there for the first kind of ERP implementation and the initial kind of corporate rollout. She was more on the finance tech side of the house, so that was her role, with more like internal finance transformation. And then when we actually got to the operational planning, we pulled in a resource who was their VP of their Americas West region. So someone who was not as fluent in the technology solutions, but knew hotels in and out. She knew how they planned, knew monthly cycles, where they were gonna run into pitfalls, blended those two resources together, and they were the key champions that we worked with on a daily basis to make sure that this solution was actually gonna hit home when we were traveling around the world and showing this to people for the first time. Also, weren't afraid to make some change happen. So we actually flew resources in around the world, had 30 people together in a room like this, where we went through a driver-based model that probably went through about 1,000 different accounts in their P&L to come up what could be driver-based, what couldn't. And it was a really efficient use of time. So it sounds like that wouldn't be, and how much input are really people going to have. But by the time that they're involved with that project and vetting that out, by the time they saw it, it really came to fruition. So I think that emphasizes just where the team needs to come into play to make sure that you're putting the right resources in place to drive success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just going back to this tech stack here, another important part for you all is really understanding how this is deployed in your organization so that if there is a new, whether it's an acquisition or whatever, you know what you need to keep or what you already have and that you can cut out from that organization. Also with again, you go downstairs to the exhibit hall and there's, however many vendors all there saying they do some slice of something similar that the other one does. So you don't end up buying essentially the same software that maybe you already have in place that you can just leverage a little bit more. All right, we have an open-ended poll here. If you all want to scan this, you can just put in, we're just curious to see what you all are thinking some of the biggest challenges are and or some of the biggest opportunities there are within your tech stack. Open-ended question, feel free to type in anything you want here. Legacy tech consolidation, definitely a big one. Definitely driving a lot of the change there. I think the interesting thing where people are trying to figure out, we get a lot flown in here, is where to lead with ERP or EPM, or do you start with all of it? Do you do one big bang? And I think that's a kind of going across all of these here.
So a theme around data, like emphasis on data quality, prioritization around different work streams, and then consolidation of technology seems to be ones that keep popping up.
Yeah. Awesome. So after this, we will, if you're interested, we will have a poll for you to put your email in, but we will consolidate all of the polling and send this out with a summary as well as some of the other themes from the conference. So you can all hear what each other's saying. All right, not gonna spend too much time here. This is just overlaying the finance tech stack, more consolidated across that information to impact. I think we can probably move on here just so we can get through the rest of this.
Yeah, no, I think for this one is what we also wanted to hit is just with upskilling being one of the key trends that we keep seeing as well. I think we see this at 2 different levels. So I'll touch it more from like a resource that you're bringing in to help more with, I would say more like your senior kind of level of bringing those skill sets into your finance organization where you actually have folks that have a little bit more of a technology background or an engineering background. This kind of goes same thing for us as a consulting firm. A lot of the folks that we're hiring out of school, they used to have more of a concentration in accounting and finance and maybe like an information systems degree with it. Everything now is business analytics. So they're coming out with some of these skills where they're actually using things like Python and be able to leverage and process big data and actually augment what your IT or data teams do, but bringing that skill set into the finance organization. And Tom, I think you see this even at kind of a higher level with one of our clients.
Yeah, so one of the clients that I alluded to earlier, they were going through finance transformation, and the VP of finance actually stood up an entire new department that rolled up underneath of him and the CFO that oversaw all of the transformation and all of the maintenance and ongoing support across their finance tech stack. And as part of that, they took some of the FP&A resources that were there and retrained them to be essentially more like techno-functional leads within the organization. So they were no longer just focused on directly budgeting, forecasting, handling variance analysis. They were more focused on driving change throughout the organization and taking the tech stack that they have and trying to embed that further into planning processes, further into reporting processes out there. And I think even aside from them, we're seeing a pretty interesting trend where we'll go out and we'll implement an EPM solution. And instead of hiring just a dedicated admin outside, we've seen other examples where FP&A resources have been retrained to be essentially the owner of the budgeting and forecasting solution out there it's worked very well in many cases to have someone that understands the business, understands the criticality of everything going on, but it can be trained up just to handle some of the more technical things like whether it's adding an account or a new entity or whatever, to being able to plan it that quicker and not having to wait to open up an IT ticket or whatever.
Yep. Cool. And then one of these things, so as we said, transformation can be different across every organization. You may be starting with, the ERP maybe is more focused on the EPM solutions that we talked about here. But here's kind of just like a framework we'd like to think about as being the foundation of starting any sort of transformation journey, is keeping these things in consideration and making sure that you're planning for it along the way. So we like to make sure that, again, everything from like the data model, this includes governance and making sure the chart of accounts is solidified. If it's not, you're going to have problems downstream. If you still have a legacy chart of accounts where you have everything baked into an account dimension and you got cost centers combined in there, it's going to be very difficult to get to a dynamic reporting solution. So try to address things like that are going to cause bottlenecks down the road up front, bring it forward, get it fixed, and then you can move on to the next thing. So that's what's going to allow you to be successful as we continue to transform. And then just touching on the last piece too, the change management aspect, making sure people are informed, making sure people participate. So, we go through this all the time where we're implementing a new solution. We get to a point where we're designing something and we're trying to get it in front of users. And we are trying so hard to pull information out of them to make sure what we're doing is correct. And we can't get the proper participation. But being a finance leader, making sure people are doing that, providing input, making sure that an implementation partner is going to know upfront what needs to change before it's getting rolled out is going to make or break whether or not this is successful or it's viewed as a successful transformation, which then gets legs to keep going. Yeah.
I think, and then one last just point on that, I think you alluded to it earlier in the finance tech stack. You don't necessarily need to completely re-implement your ERP to fix your chart of accounts.
Yep.
You can do this by looking at either the data solutions that are sitting in your organization with whether it's a data lake or whatever. You can also use that in conjunction with your EPM solution to pilot what that new chart of accounts would look like and really enhance some of the reporting without having to wait 2 years to get that benefit and go through a heavy lift when you're already overburdened by the complications of the existing chart. So
that's a great point. That just brought up a thought in my head. But we had a company that we're working with that has 170 different locations, all of which could have unique statutory reporting requirements. So within their unique kind of GL carve-out, they could have very unique aspects to how they operate. But to get to a common reporting framework, we built them a translation hub, which basically takes all of those and maps it to the new common language. So without having to re-implement the entire ERP and go location by location, you can do that in different ways, which still gets you to the point where you have that good common data lineage, you have master data covered, and you get to reporting and analytics faster.
Yeah, and that really enabled them to take a more
accelerated way of doing this, and then also bring those skill sets. So like data conversion, data reconciliation exercises now all became easier with having a tool like that.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.